Today I'm going to share 3 bone-chilling true stories that'll make you think twice about venturing into the wilderness alone. But before we dive into these terrifying tales, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, you've come to the right place, because that's all we do here. And if you enjoy this video, please take a moment to obliterate that like button with a rusty shovel, then bury it 6 feet under where no one will ever find it. Also, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Our first story takes place in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina, where 26-year-old Marcus had been planning a solo hiking trip for months. Marcus was no amateur. He'd been hiking since he was a teenager and had completed several multi-day treks before. This particular trail was supposed to be a 3-day journey through some of the most beautiful scenery the mountains had to offer. On the first day, everything went according to plan. Marcus covered about 12 miles before setting up camp in a small clearing. The weather was perfect, and he even managed to snap some incredible sunset photos to share with his friends back home. As night fell, Marcus built a small fire, cooked his dinner, and settled in for the night. Around midnight, he was awakened by what sounded like footsteps circling his tent. At first, he thought it might be a deer or some other wildlife, but the footsteps seemed too deliberate, too human. "Hello?" Marcus called out, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" No response. The footsteps stopped momentarily, then continued, now moving faster around his tent. Marcus's heart was pounding in his chest. He reached for his flashlight and knife, the only protection he had brought with him. When he finally mustered the courage to unzip his tent and peek outside, he saw nothing but darkness. The fire had died down to embers, casting just enough light to see that there was no one immediately visible. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Marcus decided to rebuild the fire, thinking that perhaps the light would deter whatever or whoever was out there. As the flames grew higher, he caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. About 30 yards away, just at the edge of the firelight's reach, stood a figure. It was too dark to make out any features, but it was unmistakably human in shape, standing perfectly still, watching him. "Who's there?" Marcus shouted, trying to sound braver than he felt. "This is private property." It wasn't, of course, but he hoped the lie might scare off an intruder. The figure didn't move. It didn't respond. It just stood there, watching. For what felt like hours, Marcus sat by his fire, knife in hand, eyes locked on the mysterious figure. Eventually, exhaustion overtook him, and despite his best efforts, he dozed off. When he awoke at dawn, the figure was gone. Marcus quickly packed up his gear, abandoning his planned route in favor of the quickest path back to civilization. As he hiked, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. Every few minutes, he would stop and listen, convinced he could hear footsteps matching his pace just out of sight. About 2 miles from the trailhead, Marcus stopped to refill his water bottle at a stream. That's when he noticed something that made his skin crawl: fresh footprints in the mud. They weren't his, and they weren't heading in the same direction. They were coming from the direction he was heading, as if someone had walked from the trailhead and then turned around when they encountered Marcus. But the most disturbing part? The footprints had no tread pattern. They were completely smooth, as if whoever, or whatever, had made them was barefoot. Marcus practically ran the rest of the way back to his car. When he finally reached the parking lot, he was shocked to find a note tucked under his windshield wiper. It was handwritten on a piece of torn paper. "You were never alone." To this day, Marcus doesn't know who was watching him that night or who left the note. He filed a report with the park rangers, but nothing ever came of it. He hasn't gone hiking alone since. Our second story comes from the dense pine forests of northern Michigan, where 32-year-old Sarah had rented a remote cabin for a week-long writing retreat. Sarah was working on her first novel and thought some time away from the distractions of city life would help her focus. The cabin was exactly what she had hoped for: rustic, charming, and completely isolated. The nearest neighbor was over 5 miles away, and the only sounds were the wind in the pines and the occasional call of a distant bird. For the first 3 days, Sarah was incredibly productive. She wrote more in those 3 days than she had in the previous month. But on the fourth night, things took a disturbing turn. Around 10 p.m., as Sarah was preparing for bed, she heard what sounded like someone walking on the cabin's porch. The wooden boards creaked distinctly, as if under the weight of heavy footsteps. Sarah froze, her heart racing. She was miles from help, with no cell service and no way to call for assistance if something happened. The footsteps circled the cabin slowly, methodically, as if whoever was out there was looking for a way in. Sarah quickly checked all the doors and windows, confirming they were locked. Then she grabbed a kitchen knife and retreated to the bedroom, where she sat with her back against the wall, listening. After about 20 minutes, the footsteps stopped. Sarah remained vigilant for hours, but eventually exhaustion won out, and she fell into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, Sarah convinced herself it had been an animal, perhaps a bear or a deer, and tried to put the incident out of her mind. She spent the day writing, but found herself constantly glancing out the windows, searching for any sign of an intruder. That night, as darkness fell, Sarah made sure every door and window was securely locked. She even pushed a heavy dresser in front of the front door for good measure. Despite these precautions, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread that had settled over her. Around the same time as the previous night, the footsteps returned, but this time they were accompanied by something far more terrifying. A voice. "Sarah," it called, barely above a whisper. "Sarah, let me in." Sarah's blood turned to ice. How did whoever was out there know her name? "Sarah, I can see you," the voice continued. "I know you're alone." Sarah grabbed her knife and phone, even though she knew there was no service. She retreated to the bathroom, the only room in the cabin without windows, and locked the door. For hours, she sat on the cold tile floor, listening as the voice called her name and the footsteps circled the cabin. Occasionally, she would hear scratching at the walls, as if someone was trying to claw their way in. When morning finally came, the voice and footsteps had stopped. Sarah wasted no time. She threw her belongings into her car and sped down the dirt road, not even bothering to clean up or check out properly. As she was leaving, she noticed something that hadn't been there when she arrived: a small wooden carving placed on the porch railing. It was a crude figure of a woman with long hair like Sarah's, and it had been positioned to face the cabin, as if watching. Sarah reported the incident to the local police, but they found no evidence of an intruder. The cabin owner claimed no knowledge of the carving and insisted nothing like this had ever happened before. To this day, Sarah doesn't know who or what was outside her cabin those nights. She's never gone back to the woods alone, and she never finished her novel. Our final story takes us to the dense forests of eastern Oregon, where 45-year-old hunter James had set up several trail cameras to track deer movements before hunting season. James had been hunting in this area for over 20 years and knew the terrain like the back of his hand. One October afternoon, James went out to check his cameras and retrieve the memory cards. Most of the cameras showed what he expected: deer, the occasional elk, and various smaller forest creatures going about their business. But the last camera, the one placed deepest in the woods, contained something that made James's heart skip a beat. Among the usual wildlife photos was a series of images taken around 2 a.m. 3 nights earlier. They showed what appeared to be a person standing directly in front of the camera, staring into the lens. The figure was dressed in what looked like tattered clothing, and their face was obscured by what James initially thought was a mask or face paint. But upon closer inspection, he realized with horror that the face wasn't covered at all. It just didn't look human. The eyes were too large, the mouth too wide, and there appeared to be no nose at all. James told himself it must be a hunter in some kind of camouflage, or someone playing a prank. But deep down, he knew that didn't make sense. This area was remote, miles from any road or trail, and the camera was well hidden. No one should have known it was there. Even more disturbing, the timestamp showed that the figure had stood motionless, staring at the camera, for over 20 minutes before finally moving on. James decided to check the area around the camera for any signs of trespassing. As he approached the spot, he noticed an unusual silence had fallen over the forest. No birds called, no squirrels chattered. It was as if all wildlife had abandoned the area. The camera was exactly where he had left it, strapped to a tree about 7 feet off the ground. But as James got closer, he noticed something strange. A pile of small animal bones arranged in a perfect circle beneath the camera. They hadn't been there when he set up the camera 2 weeks earlier. As James knelt to examine the bones, a twig snapped somewhere behind him. He spun around, but saw nothing. Then another snap, closer this time, and another. Something was moving through the underbrush, circling around him. James didn't wait to see what it was. He grabbed his camera and ran, not stopping until he reached his truck nearly a mile away. As he drove off, he glanced in his rearview mirror and saw something that still haunts him to this day. A figure, matching the one from the trail camera, standing in the middle of the dirt road, watching his truck disappear into the distance. When James got home, he immediately checked the camera to see if he had captured any new images of the figure. To his horror, the memory card was missing, even though he distinctly remembered putting it back in the camera after viewing the photos. James reported the incident to the Forest Service, but without the photos, there was little they could do. They suggested it might have been another hunter, or perhaps someone illegally growing marijuana in the remote area. But James knows what he saw, both in those photos and on the road. He's never returned to that part of the forest, and he's given up hunting altogether. So there you have it, 3 terrifying encounters in the wilderness that defy explanation. Were these people stalked by other humans with sinister intentions, or was something more supernatural at play? We may never know. If you enjoyed these stories, please remember to demolish that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your own strange encounters in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe out there, and remember, sometimes the most terrifying things in the woods aren't the animals you can see, but the watchers you can't.